Hey listeners, before we get started, I wanted to share with you a brand new podcast that you might be interested in. It's the new Braves Dugout podcast. This podcast is about all things Atlanta Braves baseball. They talk about roster moves, potential trades, game recaps. Now this may all seem cliche for a sports podcast, but they also include a special segment each week where they talk about controversial topics using only stats and logic and no bias. Controversial topics such as which Braves player should or should not be in the Hall of Fame, why your favorite player may not be as valuable as you think they are, or how certain players you may not like deserve more love. It's the new Braves Dugout podcast. You can currently catch this podcast, see what I did there? Catch this podcast on Spotify or on Anchor.fm. It's sure to be a hit!
Hello, ladies. Are your armpits smoother than a tapioca pearl? Have you had laser surgery under your arms and are now regretting it? No need to fret. We have a brand new solution for you to get back to that all-natural state. Chia Pit Cream! From the makers of other chia products comes a cream for your chia armpits to get back to its original hairy state. Unlike the original chia items, you don't even need to water your chia pits. It utilizes your natural body perspiration moisture. If you'd like to speed up the process, you can easily add other bodily fluids to the cream, like saliva or urine. Isn't that incredible? Available now in many hardware and dollar stores in the gardening section. Chia Pit Cream! Product is not intended for consumption or contact with the epidermis.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Above Average Show!
Hello everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Above Average Joe Show. As always, I am your host, Joe, and today our special guest has been an actor, a stunt performer, previously has been college football player, and a homicide detective, all those like real jobs. Not like in film jobs, but he was an actual homicide detective in real life, played football in college in real life, and has also worked on projects like Stranger Things, Godzilla King of Monsters, Undercover Brother 2, Fatal Attraction, and Snapped Killer Couples, amongst some other projects. Our guest today is Zac Zedalis. How are you doing, Zac?
Good, Joe. How are you doing?
I am doing well. Let's go ahead and get started with the first question that I always ask everybody. Zac, how did you get into the film industry?
Well, I started in theater as around 7 years old and worked my way all the way through grade school. And then I was also heavily involved in athletics, where I was fortunate enough to get an athletic scholarship for football to the University of Florida, and continued acting back and forth through college. And then after graduating, I actually went on to perform and did two things. I went and worked as my stunt performance was with EA Sports, and we did the college football and Madden tackling dummy drills up in Vancouver, Canada, where we were all the show cap work that we did. And then also I went to the WWE for about a year, World Wrestling Entertainment, and was under contract with them for 1 year in Louisville, Kentucky, called Ohio Valley Wrestling. So I did that, and then came back and went into, decided I wanted to serve the community, so I became a law enforcement officer, worked my way up to homicide detective for 12 years, and then SWAT team for 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And did polygraph examiner for the agency for 10 years, and then got out of law enforcement and decided to kind of go back to acting full time. And luckily for me, my first project really back, actually in TV and film, was Godzilla King of the Monsters, which is where I met you, and it was my first kind of introduction back. And then from there, we've been able to continue on projects and continue in the field. So it's been a long journey when I say that, but really it's been short in acting other than theater early in the years. But it's been worth it. It's been fun.
Awesome.
So we can dissect all what I just said. We can dissect all those things. But that's how I got back into film and TV, was through Godzilla
So how did you hear about Godzilla King of Monsters from living down in Florida? Do they send out notices that far down, or did you have a friend that got you into it, or?
I saw, we were, I think I saw on the internet they were doing, for background work for mercenaries, I think there was a casting call for that. And it was submitting just pictures. And so, I believe it was with Capture Casting, so your old agency
Yep.
I used to work with. And so we just submitted a picture, and I say we, myself and my fiance, just submitted a picture because she'd been in film and she did G.I. Jane and she'd been in some things, First Time Felon, and she'd done some things in Hollywood and back and forth. And so, we were back and forth between Atlanta and Florida, and so we submitted a picture. And the next thing we knew, we were selected to come up there, and it was first just his background work, which was obviously is needed. But I had no thoughts of grandeur on it. I thought, hey, this is the way to kind of get back into it, get back in the set, and just kind of see what's going on and see if we can work with things. And then, fortunately for us, some of the production and not just casting, but the director kind of liked some of the looks that they saw, and a lot of us got bumped up to kind of those featured extra roles. And I think fortunately for me, I think being taller and being bigger helped on that set because of Charles Dance being so tall, being around 6'5", and so I was his height, and so it helped. I was a little shorter than him. He's actually taller than I am, but I think that a lot of the mercenaries that were cast for the roles, for the feature or the main roles, they were shorter and they were smaller than Charles Dance. I think I got lucky and was tall enough where I fit a build. At least that's my opinion. That I was able to be put in those positions and kind of get some work, a little bit more work than just the featured extra, and got bumped up to a principal role, and was very fortunate.
And then backstepping just a few steps before you started, you had mentioned the WWE. I am a little curious on just a little bit of background on your experience in the WWE, because I know that we have quite a few people that listen to our podcast that are very heavily into wrestling. So I think this would be some fun information and a cool story.
Well, Ric Flair was a huge Gator fan, so playing for the University of Florida, Ric Flair would always come to our games. And it was my senior year. I grew a beard and cut like a bunch of different designs in my beard. You know how you do when you're 22 years old and you think you're unstoppable. So I had this bad look, I guess, and I walked down and Ric Flair saw me after the last game and said, "Hey, do you ever want to wrestle? Let me know." So some months went by and I went up to Canada and played for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers for a little bit. I didn't work out. It just wasn't the same. This football for me wasn't the same for me. So I wanted to do something else. I didn't want to go. When I say get a real job, I didn't want to go get a 9 to 5. I wanted to do something else that was more that used athletic ability and did some things that were challenging physically while I still could. And so I contacted Ric Flair, and he was able to get me a tryout with the WWE, and that was up in Louisville, Kentucky. And the big boss man took me through a workout. And fortunately for me, I was able to get a contract out of that. But the unfortunate part for me is that although I was a wrestling fan, loved wrestling, I didn't know how to wrestle. Never wrestled in high school, other than the play wrestling that you do with everybody. But I didn't know anything about it, and even though I knew a little bit about the stunt world, I did not know. I did not know the wrestling world, and that world is either you love it or you hate it. It doesn't matter. The respect level you have for those athletes and the people who perform. It for me is very high because I get to see it firsthand. So many people there were really, really skilled at what they did, and and physically you were really trusting the other wrestler, your partner, to take care of you, and vice versa, take care of them. And I didn't feel comfortable enough, and I know the other wrestlers didn't feel comfortable enough with trusting me, because I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea, and I didn't jump in the ring and just say, "Oh, I want to do it." I've always been kind of a proponent of earn your keep, learn the role, and then eventually it works out. But at that time, I was probably about 2 years too early, because 2 years after I stopped, they began to train people. There's actually a training facility here in Orlando. They trained people to become a wrestler. So they took people through and taught them moves. else. And that's just not the way things were done at that time. They had so many people who were fighting for contracts, but also people who come from different territories who were really good at what they did, and they've been doing it for years. And they all had different styles, but they all kind of knew the business, and I didn't know anything. So there was a couple things that went on. There was one that I was very green, but I was also a guy who got a contract, and there was probably a little bit of animosity, like, hey, man, who's this guy? He doesn't even know what he's talking about. Yeah, he's got a good look. Yeah, he's big, but he doesn't even know what he's doing. And here's this guy's got a contract. Well, a lot of people at the time didn't have contracts. And not for WWE. They were territory wrestlers who were making money on shows, but they didn't get a contract, so there was no guaranteed money. So I'm sure there was some animosity, and I don't blame them whatsoever. But at the same time, no one was going to help me. Like we had practice from 12 to 2, and it wasn't like I could stay after practice and work with somebody who's been doing it for 10 years. They were like, no, I'm good, man. You're good. I think the only wrestler who worked with me it was Canyon, I think he's passed away now. But Canyon worked with me, and he took time to work with me a couple of days and to teach me some things. But even him, he was still trying to make it. So he didn't really have time to deal with me, to coach me, because he was still trying to make it in the profession. So I just missed out on it if I was a little 2 years later, it would have worked out really, really well, and it would have been fine. So I decided to step back and step away from it, because one, I didn't want to get hurt, because I saw a lot of injuries, a ton of injuries in wrestling, more so than football. I saw people dislocate their ankles. I saw a guy blow out his elbow, and I was there. Brock Lesnar just left.
Okay.
John Cena had just come down to start his persona. So the WWE came in to start his persona when he came from Ohio Valley Wrestling, and then he started his John Cena persona is now. He just started developing that with management when I was there. But I was there with Charlie Haas and Rob. There was Rob Conway and people who'd been around. Travis Bane was there. I think they still wrestle to some degree. I think Travis is out of it.
Wow.
But I was there with some of those names. Matt Morgan was there. Came there for a little bit when I was there. And so, these are people who knew what they were doing, and I clearly did not. Sheldon Benjamin, he was there as well. And so a lot of good name people, but they were trying to make it. And so I just decided I'm going to step away, because one, I don't want to hurt anybody, and two, I don't want to get hurt. And I stepped away and decided to pursue other ventures.
Awesome. And so now we've got two different things that you've worked on before the film industry, which is football and then wrestling, both athletic sports, and then as the homicide detective. What have you taken from both of those two different things and brought into the film industry? Because I know that you've done sports, so a lot of the physicality would be brought into the stunt performer aspect. And then if you could also go into working as a homicide detective, and then what you did on Snapped Killer Couples was not actually acting per se. So if you want to go into both of those things real quick for us and give us kind of a background and some information on that.
Well, the athletic side, as far as football is concerned, I was very fortunate to get a scholarship to the University of Florida, and Coach Spurrier was my coach. And I think being in athletics, we did theater, but where I grew up, there wasn't a whole lot of theater. So we had some local theater, and we did some things. But when you're an athlete, sometimes I think you kind of, I don't know how the kids do it today, where they can do 10, 15 different things. I was focused on really trying to go to school, and they weren't giving out any theater scholarships. So athletics was my route to go. And for me, being involved in athletics helped me get into school, get a free education, which was fantastic. But also, I think really as an athlete, going through just social dynamics in general, it helps, because you are surrounded by people, all sorts of, all different pigmentations of skin, all different backgrounds, all different cultures in athletics, and you all have a common goal. So you're all working for one common goal. And so that was incredible as far as, and Coach Spurrier, to me at least, was a very fair, probably one of the most fair bosses I've ever had. The best player played. And when that player messed up, the second person behind them got an opportunity, and they stayed in until they messed up. It's pretty fair. I mean, so it didn't matter who was behind you or who you were in front of. If they messed up, you got an opportunity to go in and play, and that helped out tremendously as far as being able to kind of, you're responsible for yourself.
Yeah.
You're responsible for being the best player you can be, and you can't ask for any more than that, in my opinion. And then, obviously the physical part of it was nice because when you grow up and finally have a real job, hopefully you never have to worry about having to fight or have physical contact with the person you work with for the rest of your life, which is really nice.
Yeah.
Like when you go to work in football, every day you're going to have a physical confrontation. It's planned. So that's one of the things, like, especially as a lineman, you're like, okay, well, I'm going to have to go hit bump heads and smash my body into somebody for the next 2.5 hours. Whereas in a day job, whether it be acting in the case or be, you're like, wow, I want to do that. All I have to do is converse and talk to people. That's really nice. So that helped a lot as far as being physical or doing stunt work. So your body kind of gets conditioned to that. And then the law enforcement aspect, when I left the WWE, I really wanted. I had a drive where I wanted to serve. Both my parents are both government employees. My dad was an investigator for 35 years. My mom was a school teacher for 45 years. My stepmother is a law professor, and she's an attorney and worked for the basically for the defense for over 12 years. So it's kind of in my blood as far as serving. And so I wanted to serve, and I wanted to do something, but I also wanted to learn kind of about life, about people. I always enjoyed being around people, and so I thought law enforcement was the best background or the best course of action for me. And so being involved in law enforcement was great because I was able to kind of do two things at once: gain a lot of experience socially, and also serve the community. And it served both those purposes, and it was really invaluable experience. And through just being accountable, you can mend bridges and build bridges, but it takes time. You can't do that overnight. And it's one of those things where you can't have a conversation one day and then not have a conversation again. It's a relationship like anything else. All relationships, it takes time, it takes effort. You've got to put time involved, and you've got to care, and you got to go that distance to have these conversations and have these conversations and talk. And I think that's what was a great experience for me, because it really kind of goes back to film, is backstories. Everybody has a backstory, whether you're on TV or whether people care or not, whether you have 1 million Instagram followers or you have none. We all have backgrounds. We all have a place we came from. We all have families. We all have things we've overcome. We all have shortcomings. And I think that when I got to sit down and interview people who are either witnesses or they're victims or they're potential suspects, I'm not as a police officer, you're not a judge or jury. Your job's not to judge anybody. Your job's not you don't hold court. Your job is to find the truth. Your job is to establish what the facts are in a case and present those facts to either the district attorney or the state attorney. That's your job. That's all your job is, and to do those factually without any bias, without any judgment. And so that was the best part about the job, because I get to learn about so many different people. Everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different backstory, and everybody has different shoes they walked in. And you really get to take people and say, wow, this person made these decisions because of A, B, C, D. And you get to find those reasons out. Now, not in all cases. And sometimes people wouldn't talk to you. Sometimes people wouldn't open up, and you find out. You have to go through and dig through for evidence. But even then, when you would get a confession, or when you would get people who would actually tell the truth and tell the story, you could actually see, things that happened in their childhood or in their teenage years, or the mid-20s, those things changed the way they developed and changed their mindset on what was right and what was wrong, or what was fair, or what was just. And instead of saying, oh, well, I don't agree with that person, so they're guilty, you could just go, wow, that's why they got to where they are today. And you understand, okay, that makes sense. Wow, I don't know if I would go that route, but I don't know, I didn't walk in those person's shoes, but at least opens you up to the ability to say, wow, that's how they got there. And obviously these are conversations you have to always have, these conversations that can continuously be under scrutiny to talk about, just to make sure things are being done the right way.
And
but anyway, so I think the end was how that question got to the film industry. Was that where I was going with that?
So where I was going with that was you worked on Snapped Killer Couples, and you weren't actually an actor in there. You actually were one of the homicide detectives. So I was just curious about what it was like working on that project as one of the detectives, and instead of working as an actor.
You know how those shows are. Those shows take the most heinous crimes they can find, and they go through and they tell these stories, in an hour of these investigations. And so for a couple of those, we had a couple of homicides that happened, and were from the agency that I work with, and they were put on this show, and they came in and they interviewed us and went through the kind of the background of the story and how it developed and how we investigated it. And when we were interviewed for what our roles were as detectives in solving the crime. And it was, you get interviewed, you tell the truth, and you go through it. Those shows, I'm not, even though I participated, I'm not always, when I did those shows, I wasn't always really forthcoming with a lot of information, because I think law enforcement officers, as a whole, it's not really the law enforcement officers, but it's administrators, I believe, as a whole. They do a lot of, it's so funny how they're very open to how we caught somebody, and they'll get all the secrets away. Oh, we got cell phone pings. Oh, we got DNA. Oh, all these things that, yes, they're public record when it goes to trial. However, when we broadcast these things as administrators, is what they would do. But when it comes to being completely transparent about policies and procedures, about how you deal with the public, then all of a sudden it's like shut down. Like, oh, no, we don't want to really talk about those things. We don't want to talk about that. We just want to talk about how we caught somebody. So those shows, I wasn't really forthcoming with how we did things, and it's not when I'm saying how we investigated, because I don't want to give a bunch of investigative tips away for for people who are criminals, who actually prey on people, predators. Say, wow, okay, I'm going to try this next time because this is how they caught this person on the show. So I think that we have to be very cautious whenever those shows are produced, because they do give a lot of they give a lot of insight for criminals to say, well, definitely I won't bring my cell phone with me when I kill somebody, because they can ping it and find out where I'm going to be, or something like that.
Yeah, there's quite a few podcasts that I've listened to where they are interviewing detectives that have worked on cases. Podcast called Cold was really good, where they got to certain points and they're like, and from this point, I can't tell you anything because we have procedures that we do not make public at all. But let me just say that what we did, we were able to accomplish X, Y, and Z, which is very smart of them to not divulge how they got there, but just the fact that they did get there using whatever they needed to for that situation.
I think that goes back to, I think, the true cops who understand that information probably doesn't need to be shared, because it's not that we're withholding anything from the public. We're just trying to make sure that we keep those special things that we do that are within the law to catch a bad person, to catch a criminal. Those are still intact and are used later on.
Yeah.
But I really believe sometimes administrators, because they're in positions of other political positions, that they would brag on these things. At least that's from my understanding, but also what I saw personally. A lot of administrators would talk about things, and some of these administrators have never even been cops in the first place, or they never were cop very long, or they didn't do homicide investigations. I mean, I can count on all my fingers and toes all the people that are put in positions of authority within law enforcement agencies who've never actually done the job, and so they're making these decisions and they're saying these things, and they're like, wait, hold up a second, this is not good for either side.
Yeah.
But that's another conversation. So we go down that rabbit hole.
Let's go back to film, where we started. Sorry about all of that.
Oh, you're good. It's my fault.
So circling back to Godzilla King of Monsters, you worked on that for quite a few months, and during those months you had to work, quote-unquote, in different locations. So, like, some of the scenes were in the snow, some of the scenes were in, quote-unquote, Boston, where you were made to think they were Boston. Tell us a little bit about working with green screens and having to work with... we didn't have an actual Godzilla at any point in time on our set, so what it was like to work with nothing in front of you, or a tennis ball.
That was interesting, and I tell you what, I really have to give credit to people like Charles Dance and to Vera Farmiga and to Millie Bobby Brown and Kyle Chandler had to have those experiences and go back and forth when they're looking at a balloon or just looking at a blank screen or looking at a tennis ball. And really, I think that to really give credit to Cliff, the AD, assistant director, he did such a wonderful job. I believe Cliff worked on a lot of the Harry Potter movies, but he was instrumental in kind of setting the tone, because he would kind of talk. I don't know if you recall, but he would kind of talk to the actors like, "This is what's happening now. This is what's going to happen. This is happening now. This is where you're going." And he would try to trigger some of the emotions and some of the facial expressions of the actors who were involved. And just it was really interesting to see that, right, we didn't have a Godzilla. We didn't even have a picture of Godzilla. It was or a Mothra. It was a balloon. And so for the temple scene with Mothra's temple, that was just a balloon that came on. And to watch the actors having to respond to that, and I mean, we responded as well, but our faces weren't on camera as much as the main characters. And it was just it was very, a lot of, you'll hear a lot of actors say it's more reaction than it is acting, but I think they did a good job of really trying to portray where they were at that time. And I think the movie represents that very, very well.
And then after Godzilla King of Monsters, you worked on Stranger Things for a little bit as a security guard. What was it like working on one of the, if not the, largest Netflix series ever?
That was cool. It was neat to be one of the Russian guards that series, and that was fun as well. I mean, the mall scene that they had, we were there at the mall, and they took a mall in Atlanta and they completely converted it to 80s. And so when we were in that mall, they had the Kodak shop. I mean, everything that they saw, that was a set, but it was an actual mall that they converted to 80s themes, down to the lights, down to the different stores that were there. So they really did a good job on that set. But that was fun. It was it was a good. It was fun. The sad part for me, of course, I'm selfish about this, but I mean, some of the scenes in Godzilla were cut out, and then some of the scenes in Stranger Things were cut out, where we got to do some more talking because we were Russian, so we got to speak some things in Russian, which was fun. I wish that had been put on, would have been available, but unfortunately, things get cut on the editing floor, and but it was still a great experience. And it just was, every set that you go on, and because you worked in the industry for so long, I mean, every set is different, and every it's got a different feel for every set, and you just kind of you know your role, and you do what you're told, and you just kind of observe. At least I do. I observe and just kind of take it in for what it's worth.
And so you got to speak Russian for Stranger Things? Did I hear that correctly?
I did for the audition.
Okay.
I did speak it, and then the lines that we had were given. There was another actor who was going to speak the Russian. But I thought, when I was, obviously when you get a contract and say, hey, listen, you're going to be a Russian guard and be prepared for these lines, and so you prepare yourself, and then obviously either they say yes or they say no, whatever. So they gave it to the other actor, and he spoke and did a great job. And I just, I was just like selfish. I said, man, I would love to. I practiced Russian for for a couple of weeks. I really wanted to use it. But he got to say it. He did a great job with it. So it's just one of those things where you prepare yourself to be ready for it, just in case that you're called upon. But you also have to be prepared to say, okay, well, I guess it's not they're not asking me to do it, or you do it, and then they cut it out in editing. And I think that I think a lot of actors will say that a lot of their best work was left in the editing floor. I mean, especially co-stars or people who are principals. Maybe they're not. And I say this because I can only speak on my behalf. Is that you have to have a perfect take every time because you're not the star.
Yeah.
And I'm not a star. I mean, and the stars can. I don't know if you were on set, but the stars can mess up. They have a lot of lines to learn. They can mess up. They can screw up. And really, because they're the star, the editing is going to take their best take. So you've got to make sure that your take is great every time, because if they're going to take the star's best take, but if your best take is on the same side of the star best take, you're going to look bad on camera. You're going to look bad on film. So you have to make sure that you're on your A game for every single take and not take any takes off, regardless of what the star's doing. Because you want to make sure, one, you're giving them what they need, but at the same time, you want to make sure that when editing comes, that your takes you got some good meaty takes.
So let's go ahead and get things wrapped up here. Thank you again for hanging out with us, Zach. It's been such a pleasure catching up with you. It's been a couple of years. Wow. Yeah, at least 2 years, I think, since we've talked. Last time we talked was the release of Godzilla King of Monsters, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's been a while. Last time we saw each other up in Atlanta for the premiere, so that was fun. But yeah, it's been a while, but I'm glad we got the chance to catch up.
Yeah, me too. And thank you, guests and listeners, again for tuning in and listening to us. And we will see you again next week on another wonderful episode of the Above Average Joe Show.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you again to our special guest, Zac Zedalis. Be sure to check out our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitters, and look us up on Spotify, Stitcher, and iTunes. You can also check out another podcast I co-host, The Extraordinary, and other great media content by Moon Possum Productions at moonpossum.com.